Welcome back into Talking Fitchburg. Joining you today, it's your City Administrator, Chad Brecklin. Chad, we get you for an extra interview this month because, we ran out of time because you and I like to chat. But more importantly, I wanted to spend a little extra time talking about the budget, but also discussions that council has been having within the last month and a half, and it's been talks about a referendum.
Yeah.
So wanted to give you the floor here to definitely explain a few things that are going on. Let's start just first and foremost. People hear referendum. What are we talking about?
Yeah, so recently at our Committee of the Whole meetings for both July and August, and really we're going to be adding a standing agenda item for the foreseeable future, we'll be talking about the potential of an operating referendum that would be put to the voters in the city of Fitchburg next year in 2024. We are just in the preliminary stages. The City Council has directed staff to work on putting together information for the council to consider as it relates to determining whether or not they would like to pursue a referendum in 2024. So what staff has been doing is we obviously have done some staffing assessments to determine what might be some referendum asks, so to speak. As we've talked about, there's a staffing study that was done by Baker Tilly that recommended some staffing additions and enhancements to help meet capacity concerns and also facilitate perhaps additional service delivery or improve service delivery in certain existing situations. And then, of course, as you know, as a department head, we've asked all department heads to identify their staffing proposals over the next 5 years as well. And you can imagine that in the day of levy limits and other considerations in regards to the impact on our residents and taxpayers, it would be quite difficult under the current situation to afford even a fraction of the positions and proposals that have been put forth to address the needs that exist today and also are anticipated to exist and or increase over the next 5 years as the city continues to grow and expectations for a continued high level of service and or new service being provided. So we'll continue to do that. We've engaged an outreach and communications firm to help guide some of this process. And in particular, our outreach and information sharing efforts. There'll be some information going to City Council on September 12th about that particular consulting firm and utilizing their services, and then assuming an approval to begin engagement with that firm. They'll actually be appearing at the September Committee of the Whole to kind of introduce themselves to the City Council and really begin the process in earnest. So what we're looking at right now is to continue to provide information to the City Council in hopes that they'll kind of start to determine what sort of funding or what sort of things they'd like to fund if they decide to approve moving to referendum. The preliminary conversations with the council have indicated obviously a desire to add additional staffing and also to determine a potential increase in intracity transit from an east-west directional component. So staff is looking at all of those things. We'll be continuing to provide information. We encourage folks to stay tuned, stay informed, stay engaged with their elected officials, and we'll hopefully get this all sorted through. And the council, ideally, late this year or early next year, will be making a determination if they do in fact wish to put an operating referendum to the voters.
You'll be able to watch all the meetings on here. You can communicate with your alders, with city staff. But if somebody's just asking just the general question, are we short? Are we, I guess leading up to this, is there a background? You had mentioned the future components, but is there other issues that have played in a role here? You mentioned a lot of things, so I think it's important to just make sure for better understanding.
Right. Well, I think, one of the areas that folks can, immediately take a look at is the last personnel committee meeting that was held in September here. And I encourage folks to go to the city website and to the Fact TV area in particular and watch that on demand. And our two public safety chiefs, Police Chief Morales and Fire Chief Pulvermacher, did an excellent job of putting together their staffing plans and recommendations over the next 5 years. And just when we look at those two departments, what they see as existing and future need involves approximately 30 new employees in order to accomplish the high level of service delivery that both departments have continued to provide over the years. There's a number of changing factors and contributing factors as it relates to public safety staffing and service delivery these days. And just looking at those two departments in particular demonstrates a significant existing need as well as, a future need. And then, of course, looking at conversation with department heads and an assessment of their own operations, and plus the outside assessment by Baker Tilly, there are existing staffing needs within the city that, need to be, based on recommendation, addressed within the next 3 to 5 years. And we recognize as city employees that, all of those needs are not going to be addressed. It's just not going to be feasible to fund those, and we'll continue to have to do the delicate balance of making sure that we provide that high level of service to the best extent we can while keeping, cost-conscious efforts in play. So again, as you mentioned, I encourage folks to stay engaged in this topic, and if they have any questions, they are welcome to reach out to me, other city staff, and or their elected officials in particular to share their feedback, ask questions, and get informed.
The word I was looking for was levy limits, by the way, to explain the levy limits. And there was some changes that happened this year as well that helped some cities, but ultimately we're kind of still bound by what the state directs in that. What is levy limits and what is communities received?
Sure.
At this point.
So I don't profess to be a finance director. And
no.
I couldn't hold
our finance director is watching this very closely, Chad.
To our finance director, Misty Dodge, and I'm not even going to attempt to do that. But basically, the levy limits are state imposed through law that only allow us to raise our tax levy locally by the amount of net new construction that we have every year. So clearly growth is critical in order to even allow for a levy limit adjustment to happen. So even if we have 3% of net new construction, that's probably going to be about $125 million in new construction each year. Which takes a bit to get there, to be honest with you. I mean, if you look at one apartment building at typically, with 150 to 200 units, that's probably about a $30 to $35 million project. 100 houses that go up, you're probably looking at, unfortunately, with the high cost of housing, probably, $400,000 per house. That doesn't get you to $125 million in net new construction with those two items, with what we typically see if that's all you have, and we're fortunate to have the growth. But when you look at the cost of providing services, our budgets are made up of just over 70% staff, to provide benefits, cost of living adjustments, pay for the operating costs of equipment, city hall or city facilities, fire trucks, police cars, snow plows, replace equipment in meeting rooms, so that the council committee can stay informed. It adds up in a hurry. And, even if we have a 3% or greater, and we've typically in the last several years had a bit more than 3% net new construction, just to maintain the existing services, is a struggle with that level of net new construction based upon the escalating costs. And it could also be said that we're not really maintaining status quo with that, because the community continues to grow, and the staffing and other resources may not even be keeping pace with that, just because it costs money to continue doing what we're doing right now.
Well, and I think too, if you've watched the monthly or the yearly budget meetings and the capital improvement plans, these are where these discussions continue to happen each and every year. So you hear about a few new positions and whether they're going to be go or not go, but it's up to staff to continue to meet the needs of the services that residents, business want for their community. And it's just an ongoing process. So lot to come here, but It's
Yeah.
a journey.
Yeah, it sure is. And you'd mentioned an increase in shared revenue. I will at least briefly address
yes.
that as well. And, you know, we are very fortunate that the state legislature worked with the League of Municipalities, the Towns Association, and the Counties Association to increase shared revenue for all municipalities throughout the state for the 2024 budget. We had not seen an increase in shared revenue in more than 2 decades, and we're going to get an increase of about 800,000, 750 to 800,000. Which is welcome and appreciated, but unfortunately, it's going to help us close some gaps for the 2024 operating budget. Perhaps add a small number of staff, but at the end of the day, it doesn't adequately address all of the staffing and other operational considerations that we have in the city.
All right, Chad, I appreciate breaking it down. I know we could keep going on
Sure,
this.
absolutely.
The conversation does continue to happen. We'll have all that coverage for you on our Gov channel throughout our meetings, Committee of the Whole meetings and beyond. And, of course, we'll get you back here and ask you a question as well.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you so much, Chad Brecklin, City Administrator here at the City of Fitchburg.
You bet.